So let me see if I hit the right of these, correct one of these. Which one goes forward? Bingo. Okay, depending on how you define it, the WDS has been around for anywhere from close to 50 to 140 years. So it's one of the oldest catalogs that's still actively maintained. It has its background from this famous gentleman, Sherburne W. Burnham, who was as you can see, an amateur astronomer for virtually his entire life. Phenomenal observer. He started in about 1873 with his first observations with 6-inch telescope. At this time, the sort of prevailing wisdom was that all doubles have been discovered by the Herschels and the Struvas, so why bother? So he immediately, with his 6-inch, discovered 80 new doubles, and he went on to discover about 1,500 or so. Extreme delta M's, very close systems. He was, as I say, a phenomenal person. So there's his copy of his first paper, which I think was, the 6-inch Alvin Clark refractor. He eventually went on to use the 36 course in the 40-inch telescopes for a lot of work. He, for a short time, it says he worked at Lick. He was hired there and then found out he couldn't make enough money to support his family, so went back to being a court reporter and then going weekends to Yerkes to work in the snow. Now, for our purposes, his other big claim to fame, of course, besides all these doubles he discovered, was this catalog here. And the background of it, some of you may know, at the time he started working, there was no comprehensive catalog of double stars that had been discovered. People had their own lists. There were lots of publications out there, but no comprehensive listing, which meant that the same double star was discovered 2, 3, 4, 6 times by different people and claimed as their own because nobody knew any better. He decided that this was annoying, frustrating, so he started a card catalog, index cards. He hunted down every observation he could find, put them on index cards, and cataloged them for about 30 years. He tried a few times to get it published. Eventually, he was able to get money from the Carnegie Institute and published it in 1906. The real title there, but of course we usually call it just the WDS, or the Burnham Double Star Catalog. Now, he maintained it for a while, wanted to do a new version, but he was getting close to retirement, so he decided he would turn all his cards over to Eric of the to carry on his work and do another publication. Unfortunately, Eric Doolittle was not in great health, so sometime in the 19-teens, he made Aitken, Robert Aitken, a young astronomer at Lick, promise that he would take it over if something happened to him. And indeed, something happened to him. He died in 1920. So Aitken took over the catalog, collected things up, and eventually published the ADS in 1932. You're all familiar with that one, I'm sure. About this same time, as you can see from that, well, from his original, this is within 121 degrees of the North Pole. The ADS is about the same sky. The southern hemisphere, Robert Thornton Ayres Innes, and some colleagues put together a southern double star catalog, which was up to -19. He was an interesting amateur as well, by the way. He was a wine merchant the first time he did his observations of double stars. So, in 1950s, of course, Lick, because Aitken worked for Lick already had all the northern data. In the 1950s, all of the southern data was transferred to Lick as well. So everything was combined together to form the IDS. Under Hamilton Jeffers, who was the head of that project, Frances Greeby actually did all of the work, however. She took all of some 186,000 observations and put them all on punch cards. So she deserves a lot of the credit for the IDS. At this time, this was when the names changed. By the way, yesterday we had a talk on Beta 321. The different codes for observers, Beta for Burnham and Delta for Dembowski and Sigma for Struve, those all had to be converted to letter codes, of course, for the punch cards, and that's why they're all capital letters, by the way. That's why Herschel Jr. is no longer lowercase h, but he's HJ. So in 1963, this was put together and published. It was, by the way, it was published as the index catalog because there were too many observations to publish all the individual observations in the one catalog. Now, unfortunately, at about this time, the double star field at Lick was going downhill. They had a new director, a big telescope, and he wanted to go toward astrophysics. So Jeffers was going to retire. They weren't going to replace him. So with great regret, especially on the part of Jeffers, he did not want it transferred. In 1964, it was decided to transfer the catalog to USNO. Another Lick observer, Charles Worley, had come to the observatory in 62 or 63, so he took over the WDS at that point. And that's where it's remained ever since, which is why it's close to its 50th anniversary. Charles maintained the catalog till late 1997. Brian Mason was hired there in 97 as his replacement. Unfortunately, Charles died 3 days before his retirement, so he didn't stick around to help Brian over the years. And I came on a couple years later. Just to show you that it's a popular catalog. It's done pretty well over the years. So so these down here, of course, were not all Sky catalogs, but beginning with the IDS, it's increased fairly well over the years. We've just, as of a week ago, Friday, we hit 125,000 pairs. So, not bad. So, what have we been up to lately? Those of you who've gotten data requests from probably a year ago and now have seen that there have been a few changes over this last year. Now, I told you all these things were put on punch cards, and that sort of defined the size of the catalog and the format for many years. We sort of restricted this 80 column. For you young people, cards had only 80 columns to put everything in there. So decimal points had to be dropped, names had to be shortened, you know, the first 2 digits of years were gone, things like that. So it was really compact. When I got there, it was still more or less defined by those 80 columns. So we tried to expand it somewhat. We also decided we needed better coordinates. The WDS coordinates were arc-minute accuracy. Many of them were just best without proper motion from IDS 1900 coordinates, you know, arc-minute precision. So we needed to make some improvements. So we added a column for precise coordinates and have been adding that ever since. We're virtually complete. Some of that 1.2% are the bogus binaries, so not much you can do without those. So this past summer, we decided to make another big expansion. We had been limited in the number of decimal places for separations and such, and there was no room for formal errors, anything like that, filter information. So we expanded it quite considerably this past summer, added space for all of this, more filter information, and that allowed us to incorporate a lot more information. One of our other catalogs, the interferometric catalog, had a lot of this photometry information and the formal errors. So since the summertime, I've been all that information over in the WDS. Also, we had 2 mass observations in the WDS, but not the photometry. So we've also included all the photometry for some 60-some-odd thousand pairs. So that's improved it considerably. You see another 135 2-mass measures of photometry. This past fall, I matched the UCAC4 against all of them I could, which is about 65,000 pairs. 10 minutes, okay, well, plenty of time here. As you can see, we've got another 67,000 UCAC4 measures. We have 76,000 APAS photometry measures. Everybody familiar with APAS? Enough people. This was the AAVSO's project to do good standard filter photometry all sky. I don't know how many they have at the moment, but it's a quite a considerable number. And when Norbert Zacharias put together the UCAC4, he did matches against APAS. So the UCAC4 catalog includes all the 2-mass photometry and the APAS photometry that's available. So all the APAS has been added as well, which means the WDS is increasing asymptotically. I believe we'll hit infinity by about 2020 or something like that. So means our cataloging efforts, which is why I want you to stop sending me data so I'll be able to keep caught up with all this stuff, okay? So as you can see, it's been growing at a good rate because of all the additions of photometry and also all of the data mining and all you, and you guys are providing, I think in terms of actual measures, last I heard you guys provide about a third of the data that goes into WDS. So something you guys should all be here for. So anyway, so it's a growing catalog, very vibrant, I think. Still to come. Up with you guys. Our summer been changed too much, and it's somewhat. We have some arrangements with people who grab it like Strasbourg and things in a fixed format, and we're going to need to kind of give them lots of leave time before we make big changes. Lead time, I should say. Maybe they need leave time as well. So we want to add the UCAC proper motions when available for the things fainter than Tycho, and additional APAS photometry for those fainter pairs as well. So we want to reformat the summary lines eventually, give them more space for rho and theta. You know, it's still at 1/10 of an arc second for rho. More space for components, spectral types, etc. We're very restricted in how much information we can give on spectral types and things. Eventually, we're going to have to change the WDS designation. We're getting enough pairs that there are places where arc-minute precision just doesn't work. You know, there are more than one pair per square arc minute in some areas. I've been able to do a little finessing by changing a digit by one. You know, so if you'll see some WDS designations that are off a little bit, sometimes it's just because there are too many of them that are close together. But there are places near clusters and things where, you know, I got 20 pairs within an arc minute field. That's kind of awkward. So eventually we may have to go to an arc second precision WDS designation. We still have the Durkmusterung numbers, BD numbers, and CD, CPD. Very few people use those now, and they're not very good coordinates anymore. So we may just drop that, give us extra space in the summary lines eventually. Suggestions about what to replace it with might be interesting. Adding something like parallaxes or other information like that might be useful to the summary catalog. It definitely would be useful for the orbit catalog, for example. So we welcome suggestions about things that might be useful and that won't take up 100% of our time to incorporate in 125,000 pairs. So suggestions, I say, would be very useful to do. So the last thing, everything to the web. That's very convenient for you guys to not do a request, just to grab it off the web. There have been some, well, I guess political issues, I suppose. The reason it's not on everything on the web right now. We had an unfortunate circumstance before I got there of essentially somebody taking one of our catalogs, reformatting it, and calling it their own, and giving a one-line acknowledgement to somebody who'd spent decades putting it together. You know, so it's a sensitive thing about putting all this stuff out there. I think it just has to happen eventually, but there's still some arm twisting, I guess, and convincing to do for that. Anyway, I think that is sources for all my various pictures and things like that. But I think that's all I have to talk about. It's yet. I'd be happy to answer any questions you want.